Subcommittee on Space will come to order. Without objection, the chair is authorized to declare recesses of the committee at any time. Welcome to today's hearing entitled An Overview of the Budget Proposal for the National Aeronautics and Space Administration for Fiscal Year 2016. I recognize myself for 5 minutes for an opening statement. The first and perhaps most important point I want to make today is that I believe the taxpayers' investment in NASA is generally well spent, and that I support increasing NASA's budget if we are assured American access to space. Discretionary spending such as research and development investments at NASA is the seed corn of future economic growth. In order to preserve these activities, we must address the larger economic problems we face as a nation. This involves either complying with the President's Budget Control Act, which caps discretionary spending, or figuring out how to repeal, replace, or amend it. Unfortunately, this proposal does not do that. Because this request does not provide any constructive or workable guidance, Congress must now bear that burden. I had hoped that the administration would demonstrate leadership by proposing a realistic budget, but instead we are presented with a list of unfunded priorities. At NASA alone, the President's request exceeds the budget caps by $519 million. This isn't to say that this is an unreasonable request. After all, the increase simply reflects the rate of inflation. The concern that I have is that the administration did not propose offsets to account for the increase, did not propose a workable solution to repeal, replace, or amend the President's Budget Control Act, and once again reorganizes priorities in previous bipartisan NASA funding bills that the President signed. For example, the budget proposes cutting the Space Launch System by $344 million, the Orion Crew Capsule by $98 million, the Planetary Science Division by $77 million, the Heliophysics Division by $11 million, the Aeronautics Mission Directorate by $80 million, and NASA Education by $30 million. SLS and Orion are national assets. They are the tip of the spear in our nation's deep space exploration efforts. Cuts to the Planetary Science Division will empty the pipeline for outer planet missions and force scientists and engineers into other fields and into foreign projects. Cuts to heliophysics are weakening our ability to understand and predict solar storms that could threaten astronauts in space and impact communication, financial, and energy systems here on Earth. Cuts to NASA education hurt NASA's ability to engage and inspire the next generation of explorers. These harmful cuts accompany increased requests for other activities at NASA. The President's proposal seeks to increase the Earth science budget by $175 million this year. This amounts to a 63% increase since 2007. The budget also seeks to dilute NASA's existing Earth science research portfolio by conducting other agencies' work. It seeks to develop climate sensors for NOAA and land imaging capabilities for USGS. While NASA certainly has the expertise to do this work, they don't have the budget or the requirements. NOAA is tasked with maintaining operational climate measurements, and USGS is tasked to maintain Landsat measurements. If NASA is tasked to do other agencies' work, it should do so on a reimbursable basis as it does successfully for other programs, such as the Joint Polar Satellite System and the Geostationary Operational Environmental Satellite System. The budget request also seeks an increase of $129 million for the Space Technology Mission Directorate and $439 million for the Commercial Crew Program. I fully support developing the capabilities necessary to launch American astronauts on American rockets from American soil as soon as possible. I also believe that NASA should be investing in the technologies necessary to enable future exploration. Congress will have to evaluate these proposals to ensure that they are the most efficient uses of taxpayer resources in a challenging budget environment. For example, NASA has argued that it is necessary to fund 2 contractors in the Commercial Crew Program to provide a redundant capability and enable competition to drive down costs. That is why NASA selected 2 contractors last fall. Congress will have to decide whether a redundant capability is best provided by 2 contractors in the Commercial Crew Program or by external capabilities such as the Orion Crew Vehicle on an existing launch vehicle. The NASA Authorization Act of 2010 requires NASA to ensure that Orion can serve as an emergency backup to the Commercial Crew Program. NASA has not devoted any effort to complying with this requirement. The benefits of cost competition also need to be weighed, considering the government now has fixed price contracts. Ultimately, Congress will have to decide whether the nation should develop a capability or should stand up a market. One thing that would assist Congress in evaluating this proposal is an independent cost estimate for the Commercial Crew Program. NASA previously contracted for an independent cost assessment, which only evaluated contractor-provided data. Now that we have fixed-price contracts from the contractors, NASA should initiate a more thorough independent cost estimate to determine whether the contractors can be reasonably expected to execute within cost and schedule. Another NASA activity that would benefit from an independent cost estimate is the asteroid retrieval and redirect mission. Unfortunately, NASA indicated that it was unnecessary to conduct an independent cost estimate prior to selecting optional mission concepts, despite a recommendation from the NASA Advisory Council. The RM mission still hasn't garnered any support in academic, scientific, exploration, or international communities. NASA's own advisory bodies have heavily criticized the mission. Without consensus, without a realistic cost, and without a clear explanation of how it fits into a broader exploration architecture, it is tough to see how this proposal gains traction in the remaining 18 months of the President's term. NASA is at a crossroads. Unfortunately, the last 6 years featured drastic change with the cancellation of Constellation and uncertain direction with the President's ever-changing asteroid initiative. Congress has been consistent in its guidance to NASA that it develop a long-term sustainable exploration strategy that is evolvable and flexible based on an uncertain budget environment. Recent announcements from NASA indicate that the agency is heeding that direction by working towards an architecture that can weather the storms of change that accompany new administrations. Administrator Bolden and his leadership team have a tough job. General Bolden, I'm glad you're at the reins. And at this time, I recognize our ranking member, Ms. Edwards.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, and welcome to Administrator Bolden at today's hearing. Mr. Chairman, I want to thank you for calling this hearing on an overview of the budget proposal for the National Aeronautics and Space Administration fiscal year 2016 budget. The President is requesting $18.5 billion for NASA's programs and plans for fiscal year 2016. That's about a 2.8% increase over FY 2015 enacted appropriation. It's a significant top-line increase given the current fiscal environment. But it's also a proposal but the question is whether it's a proposal that's sufficient to enable NASA to do all that we've asked and expect it to accomplish. I want NASA to succeed, and I want to provide it with the tools and resources needed to continue to achieve great things for this nation and our citizens. Like the winglets we now see on commercial aircraft that improve fuel efficiency and which were invented through NASA's Aeronautics Research Program. The scientific exploration of uncharted corners of our solar system, such as Pluto, where the New Horizons probe will provide our first close-up examination of this remote body when it arrives there this summer. The successful Orion Exploration Flight Test 1 that helps us prepare to once again send humans beyond low Earth orbit, and being the source of inspiration that lights up children's faces as they hear from astronauts and researchers, watch a launch, and realize that they too can be our next space scientists, engineers, and explorers. Mr. Chairman, accomplishments such as these would not have been possible without the ingenuity, know-how, commitment, and dedication demonstrated by the NASA federal workforce and its partners in industry and academia. So they deserve our thanks for all they do. They and the public also deserve to know what lies ahead for NASA. Over the past few years, we've heard from many witnesses that stability is a critical enabler for NASA's progress. That is why in my statement on the House floor for passage of the now House-passed bipartisan NASA Authorization Act of 2015, I said that NASA needs our constancy of purpose and direction now, so that we might provide some stability to the agency while we work on multi-year reauthorizations once the current bill is enacted into law. So I hope that what we hear today about whether or not the fiscal year 2016 budget request provides NASA with the clear goals that maintain a constancy of purpose. And one area where the need for constancy of purpose has been widely discussed is human exploration. Perhaps because of the commitment of resources and goals that must span multiple Congresses and presidential administrations if we're to be successful in that undertaking. To that end, I'm pleased that NASA and the community have embraced Mars as a long-term goal for human exploration. And indeed, our Bipartisan Authorization Act establishes such a goal and directs the development of a roadmap to get us there. I hope Congress has the foresight to commit the necessary resources to fund a Humans to Mars plan, because it is a worthy goal that, among other things, will do much to advance our nation's technological capabilities. But as the National Academy stressed just a year ago, if Mars is a worthy goal, and they think it is, and if we think it is, we need to provide the resources to achieve it. If Congress is unwilling to commit the required resources, we must not let the enthusiasm for a goal of sending humans to Mars divert resources from NASA's other important mission areas. Because our House-passed Bipartisan NASA Authorization Act reflects an enduring commitment to NASA's multi-mission role, this is true. I look forward to hearing from Administrator Bolden and to working with him and my colleagues on maintaining a constancy of purpose for NASA going forward, and I thank you and I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Edwards. I now recognize the Chairman of the full committee, Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I, like you, appreciate Administrator Bolden's testifying today. While there are some areas of agreement between the committee and the administration in this budget, the President's request regrettably changes agreed-upon national priorities. The President's request puts NASA in a tough position because it ignores his own sequestration levels and fails to identify offsets for increases of $500 million. It is hard for Congress to consider this a serious proposal when it does not comply with the law and is not grounded in reality. I also disagree with the administration's continued attempt to redistribute funding within NASA. For example, Europa is one of the best destinations we have in our own solar system for finding life beyond our planet. Yet this year's request of $30 million for the Europa mission is disappointing considering the mission's potential. In contrast, Congress has funded a Europa mission at $75 million, $80 million, and $100 million over the last 3 years. Missions like this, as well as the search for exoplanets and signs of life in other areas of our universe, captivate the American people. I appreciate the progress, on the other hand, that has been made with other priorities, such as the James Webb Space Telescope, the Transitioning Exoplanet Survey Satellite, and the Wide Field Infrared Space Telescope. Overall, though, there is a lack of balance in the overall science account request. Congressional guidance and the decadal surveys advocate for a balanced portfolio of science activities. Unfortunately, the President's request does not adhere to that recommendation by the space experts. One of the most glaring examples is the disproportionate increase in the Earth Science Division, and it receives at the expense of other science divisions and human and robotic space exploration. There are 13 other agencies involved in climate change research, but only one that is responsible for space exploration. In the last 8 years, the Earth Science Division funding has increased by more than 63%. This year, the administration requested another increase of $175 million over last year's levels for a total increase of nearly $2 billion. The administration doesn't even come close to funding other science divisions at this level. The planetary science budget request is 43% lower than the Earth science budget request. Also, the Earth science request is almost as much as the Astrophysics Division, the James Webb Space Telescope, and the Heliophysics Division combined. This is anything but a balanced portfolio. These increases come at the expense of NASA's high-priority exploration programs, which the White House has once again attempted to raid to fund the administration's environmental agenda. The budget underfunds the Space Launch System and Orion programs, and it cuts human spaceflight programs by almost $400 million. The Obama administration seems to have forgotten NASA's priorities, and the main one is space exploration. This budget also continues to request funding for the uninspiring asteroid retrieval mission ARM, which was recently rebranded the Asteroid Retrieval and Redirect Mission. The administration continues to push this mission on NASA without any connection to a larger exploration roadmap and absent support from the scientific community or even NASA's own advisory committees. This is an uninspiring mission without a realistic budget or destination. It has no certain launch date or ties to existing exploration goals. It is a mission that is without the consensus necessary to make it a reality in the 18 months remaining in the Obama administration. The administration continues to starve NASA's exploration programs to fund a partisan environmental agenda. NASA simply deserves better. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll yield back.
Thank you, Chairman Smith. Let me introduce today's witness. Our first and only witness today is the Honorable Charles F. Bolden, Jr. General Bolden has been the Administrator of NASA since 2009. Prior to becoming Administrator, General Bolden served for 34 years in the Marine Corps, including 14 years as a member of NASA's Astronaut Office. General Bolden has traveled to orbit 4 times aboard the Space Shuttle, including the flight that deployed the Hubble Space Telescope. General Bolden has several honorary doctorates from a variety of prestigious universities and received his bachelor's in electrical science from the United States Naval Academy. In order to allow time for discussion, please limit your testimony to 5 minutes. Your entire written statement will be made part of the record. I now recognize General Bolden for 5 minutes to present his testimony.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Chairman and members of the subcommittee, 5 years ago, yesterday, President Obama came to the Kennedy Space Center and laid out what I consider to be a bold, transformative agenda for NASA. He challenged us to embark on a journey to Mars. He challenged us to extend the life of the International Space Station and increase Earth-based observations. He called for investments in new, advanced technologies that will not only take Americans farther into space than ever before, but also will provide spin-off benefits and create high-paying jobs here at home. 5 years later, we've made landmark progress toward these goals. SpaceX's successful launch just this week is a shining example. The budget proposed by the President furthers the goals we share of extending our reach into space while strengthening American leadership here at home. It is an $8.5 billion investment that represents a leap into a future greater of discovery, job creation, and economic growth, as well as a healthier planet. Thanks to the hard work of our NASA team and partners all across America, we've made a lot of progress on our journey to Mars. In fact, we have now progressed farther on this path to sending humans to Mars than at any point in NASA's history. And this budget will keep us marching forward. The support of this subcommittee and the Congress are essential to this journey. The International Space Station is the crucial first step in this work. It is our springboard to the rest of the solar system. And we are committed to extending space station operations to at least 2024. Thanks to grit, determination, and American ingenuity, we've returned ISS cargo resupply missions to the United States, insourcing these jobs and creating a new private market in low Earth orbit. Under a plan outlined by the administration earlier in its term, we have also awarded 2 American companies, SpaceX and Boeing, fixed-price contracts to safely and cost-effectively transport our astronauts to the space station from U.S. soil. This will end our sole reliance on Russia. It is critical that we receive the funding requested for 2016 so that we can meet our 2017 target date and stop writing checks to the Russian Space Agency. Our newest, most powerful rocket ever developed, the Space Launch System, or SLS, has moved from formulation to development, something no other exploration-class vehicle has achieved since the agency built the Space Shuttle. The Orion spacecraft performed flawlessly on its first trip to space this past December. The SLS and Exploration Ground Systems are on track for launch capability readiness by November of 2018, and the teams are hard at work on completing technical and design reviews for Orion. Our budget also funds a robust science program with dozens of operating missions studying our solar system and the universe. New Horizons is preparing for its arrival at Pluto in July, and Dawn has entered into orbit around the dwarf planet Ceres. Before we send humans to Mars, robots are paving the way. We are at work on a Mars rover for 2020 and have begun planning a mission to explore Jupiter's fascinating moon, Europa. NASA is a leader in Earth science, and our constantly expanding view of our planet from space is helping us better understand and prepare for these changes. NASA has 21 research missions studying Earth, and in the last year alone, we launched an unprecedented 5 more. We also are at work on humanity's first voyage to our home star, a mission that will repeatedly pass through the sun's outer atmosphere. NASA's Hubble, Chandra, and Kepler space telescopes explore the universe beyond our solar system. Hubble's successor, the James Webb Space Telescope, is taking shape right now out in Maryland, and a new mission is in development to extend Kepler's pioneering work in finding planets. Technology drives science, exploration, and our journey to Mars. With the President's request, NASA will continue to maintain a steady pipeline of technology to ensure that we continue to lead the world in space exploration and scientific discovery. NASA is also with you when you fly, and we're committed to transforming aviation by dramatically reducing its environmental impact, maintaining safety in more crowded skies, and paving the way toward revolutionary aircraft shapes and propulsion systems. Mr. Chairman, America's space program is not just alive, it's thriving. The strong support we receive from this subcommittee is making that happen, and I particularly appreciate the generous fiscal 2015 appropriation. As the President said at the Kennedy Space Center, and I quote, "For pennies on the dollar, the space program has improved our lives, advanced our society, strengthened our economy, and inspired generations of Americans," unquote. NASA looks forward to working with the Congress to continue making this vision a reality. I would be pleased to respond to your questions.
Thank you, Administrator Bolden, for your testimony. The chair recognizes himself for 5 minutes for questions. The NASA Authorization Act of 2010 directed NASA to develop the Orion Crew Vehicle and the Space Launch System, or the SLS rocket. The development of these systems is managed by NASA's Exploration Systems Development Program. Congress has consistently provided more funding for exploration systems development than NASA has requested. This was true even in the fiscal year 2013 budget, despite reductions due to sequestration. The first test flight of Orion and SLS without a crew, known as EM-1, was formally expected in 2017. When NASA completed Key Decision Point C on the SLS last year, why didn't NASA use the review to develop a budget to maintain the 2017 launch date instead of using the Joint Confidence Level development process to delay the launch and cut the budget?
Mr. Chairman, you mentioned the 2010 Authorization Act, and I was going to go back to that anyway, because that is what established the bipartisan priorities for this agency. And I will just review them. They're the James Webb Space Telescope, exploration through the Space Launch System in Orion, and ISS, at that time extended to 2020. We have subsequently gotten it extended to 2024, and we recently got the agreement from our Russian partners that they too should believe that we should extend ISS to 2024. We have done everything that we promised in the appropriations in the Authorization Act, and we continue to be focused on those as our key priorities. We have actually accomplished, as you have already mentioned, many of the things that many people would not have believed we would have done by now. If you go to Michoud, we're actually welding barrel sections for SLS. If you go down to the Cape, we're going through the study of Orion from its first flight, trying to get it ready. We're working on the next milestone for Orion, where we will go through a similar process that we did for SLS and the ground system, so that we can establish an availability date for the first integrated flight of Orion and SLS. We have taken the funds that the American taxpayer has allowed us to have, and I think we've delivered on the promises that we've made to this Congress and to the American public.
I don't think you actually answered the question. So, after the Key Decision Point C was made, why didn't NASA go back and use the Joint Confidence Level to try to maintain the 2017 target?
The team did what I asked them to do. I originally said I am willing to accept a 30% confidence level, where NASA accepts, as a general rule, a 70% confidence level. And so that everybody understands what that is. That says that we are 70% confident that we can do this project within the budget that we proposed and by the date that we proposed. Once we went through KDPC, I could have said, okay, let's go back to a 30% confidence level. That would have almost guaranteed that we wouldn't make 2017 or any other date. And I have promised this committee and others that we're past telling you that we're going to do something and then not performing. I think if you look at our performance over the last few years, whether it's in science, in human exploration, or anything else, for the most part, we have delivered on time, and that's because we have chosen a very structured process like the Joint Confidence Level process to tell us when we think things are going to be available and how much they're going to cost.
Okay, I understand that, and just want to kind of remind people that several times you've testified in front of this committee that we were absolutely on schedule for 2017 launch, and that even the lower level funding requests that came from NASA, Congress always exceeded what the President's ask was because of the importance of SLS and Orion. The NASA Advisory Council, NAC, recently voted unanimously to find that NASA's proposed asteroid redirect mission, or ARM, ought to be repurposed toward a mission to Mars itself. They claim that ARM's asteroid retrieval aspect didn't efficiently contribute to the journey to Mars, and that the scientific material provided by ARM would be a duplication of work performed by OSIRIS-REx. The NAC was further skeptical of ARM because NASA already has a robotic asteroid sample return mission in OSIRIS-REx, which would cost significantly less than the ARM. Have you considered the NAC's alternate proposal of simplifying ARM into a Mars mission that functions purely as a solar electric propulsion testbed?
Mr. Chairman, ARM is a precursor for Mars. ARM is a critical component of getting humans to Mars. Among the things that the ARM mission does is it forces us, or it is providing us the opportunity to upgrade our solar electric propulsion to high-energy solar electric propulsion that will enable us to move large masses from Earth to Mars or from lunar orbit to Mars. That is essential. The NAC has said that no matter what we do with ARM, we must not lose that demonstration. The second thing that ARM allows us to do, provided we're successful in getting a portion of an asteroid or an asteroid into orbit around the moon, is it allows us to put humans in connection with that particular piece of an asteroid to learn how to operate in low gravity or no gravity environments the way we're going to have to do when we go to Mars. So ARM accomplishes two at least, of the primary functions or technology developments that even the NAC says we have to do. The other thing, I appreciate the fact that people appreciate that we're going to bring back some samples with OSIRIS-REx. What people don't appreciate is that we're going to have astronauts interacting with an asteroid in orbit around the moon, and that is not being done by any other mission on the books. It has not been done before. And then finally, there is a small thing that is on my mind all the time, because Chairman Smith hosted Dr. Holdren and General Shelton and me to what I tell him all the time was the most substantive hearing I have participated in, and that was one on near-Earth objects. And at that time, Mr. Posey, Mr. Brooks, and others bombarded me with demands that I tell them what we were going to do if an asteroid was inbound. And I finally gave up and said I would pray. That was not a good answer. That was not a technical answer. It made big time with my priest, but it didn't help anywhere else. Today, if asked that question, I would tell them that we now have a mission underway, which is called the Asteroid Redirect Mission, that is going to inform our ability to actually deflect an asteroid or do something to protect this planet. So 2 years ago in the hearing, my answer was repeatedly, we don't have a thing we can do. That was the reason I resorted to my religion. Today, I can tell you, we have a mission that is on the books, that is being developed, that will answer the question from Mr. Posey and Mr. Brooks and anyone else who is concerned about the threat from near-Earth asteroids.
Well, we can definitely probably hold additional hearings. I think we've held two already on near-Earth objects and the threats that they may pose to Earth and the human race. But in essence, you disagree with your advisory committee.
Mr. Chairman, I don't disagree with the advisory committee. That's not my place. Right. They are an advisory committee. That means, in fact, I find it, two of the people that I respect the most who are astronauts are Buzz Aldrin and Gene Cernan, because I have to choose between their beliefs. Gene Cernan says I should be going to the moon. Buzz Aldrin says I should be going to Mars. I don't disagree with either of them. I respect their opinion, but only one of them, is right as a number one priority. I happen to choose Buzz Aldrin's number one priority as Mars because Moon is on the way. We will put people back on the Moon, but we can do that on the way to Mars. You can't get to Mars if you stop at the Moon.
All right. Well, I appreciate you responding to my questions, and of course, without consensus in the scientific, the exploration, and international communities, not to mention the people here on Capitol Hill, I think you will be challenged to make ARM last longer.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, may I?
I'm
okay.
3.5 minutes over, and I know she's going to take at least 3.5 minutes over, too. Hopefully she won't. This is a well-attended hearing, but at this time I recognize the Ranking Member Edwards for her questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and you've come to know me so well. Administrator, I want to go back to the budget proposal because, I indicated this in my opening statement about this idea of constancy of purpose for NASA and what's required. And so I'm really, confused. I mean, part of me thinks it's kind of a game where the proposed reductions to SLS and Orion from the fiscal year 2015 enacted levels, and then Congress comes back and the administration proposes one thing, Congress comes and, puts it in. Here we go again. The proposal is one thing, and I don't know, is there an expectation that Congress is going to say, well, SLS and Orion, of course, those are signature important programs, and we'll put the money in. Why doesn't, if this is an important priority for the agency and for the nation, why don't you just put it in the budget and not have us, sit here and ask questions about why it's not in the budget, and knowing that the proposal that you have in front of us probably doesn't support the integration that's necessary. It may not support the pathway along to EM2. What's the real number for SLS Orion? And maybe we should just pencil that in.
Congresswoman, I honestly believe that the number that we put in the President's budget will get us to the target dates and the target achievements that we say. As I have responded to this and many other committees, when you give me more money, I appreciate it and I use it. And what we do is we buy down risk. We were able to get to 70% confidence level on SLS and Orion, or SLS and the ground systems, because we did have more money. I was willing to accept a lower probability, but I don't think we should operate that way. So if you gave me more money today and told me to spend it on SLS, that's not going to change the date of availability for SLS for EM1. I would much rather take the money that, as we have it planned out, to make a sustainable program. We're not talking about one flight. In fact, when we go through the milestone review for Orion, we're going to give you a budget plan and a date that we think we can make for the second flight of Orion and SLS, because that's the critical flight for us, not the first flight. The second flight is the first human flight. And so we made the decision that for Orion, then KDPC and other milestones would look at the first human flight. If you tell me to put the money into SLS for EM1, I can do that. And then we have a one-flight program that I've got to later figure out how to sustain.
I appreciate your saying that, but let's just remember this day when that is said, because if we come down the line, we're going to take you at your word.
Yes.
That you don't need that. And so then I want to ask you about the impact of the cuts that are proposed to aeronautics on our ability to maintain leadership in aviation and aeronautics within increasingly competitive global environment. I mean, we've had that conversation before on this committee where it feels like aeronautics kind of gets short shrift. So can you explain those cuts?
The cuts came at my direction because that's, when I looked at the top line that I was willing to submit, which was over what we had been asked to submit, I had to decide where we could make the most, where we could pick up the most with money that we had, and aeronautics was once again an area that I had to take some funds from. So it was simply prioritizing funds that we had and trying to see what we could do the most with. Dr. Jaewon Shin and his team did a new strategic plan. They have 6 strategic thrusts, and we think with the funds that we put in the budget, we'll be able to continue to make progress in those areas.
So let me just ask you then about Europa and the Europa mission really quickly, because there are also proposed reductions in planetary science in the middle of the development of a very ambitious Mars 2020 mission. So can you explain that?
Yes, ma'am. You know, I get this from the planetary scientists all the time. In July, we will achieve something that has never before been done by any country, anything. We will have satellites that will be studying, orbiting every single planet in the solar system and the dwarf planet Pluto, and we will have a spacecraft that is in interstellar space. We managed to do that with limited funds because we appreciate everything that the Congress has given us, but it is limited, and so we can either take stuff off the plate or we can figure out ways to do the best we can to achieve the missions that you have given us, and sometimes we have to come back and tell you it can't be done in the time frame that you want. People want Europa in 2022. Can't be done in that time frame. We will continue to say that. We know about how long it will take us to put a mission on Europa. So it's simply a matter of prioritization. Again, all of you have mentioned in your opening statements that we're over the Budget Control Act number. Yes, we are. Maybe.
You didn't hear that complaint from me. So I just have, because the time is limited, even though I'm going over out of respect for the chairman, I didn't want to go here, but now that you've taken me to asteroid redirect, why is it that we just can't, in our authorization, and we know that it is not law, but you've promised a roadmap on, sort of laying out what the choices are and how we're going to get to Mars. And what happens is that you come in front of the, committee, and with all due respect, you haven't provided the roadmap, but you said this is the direction that we're going using the asteroid redirect. And it feels like, we're missing a little bit of communication here. It would be important for this committee to have a roadmap, to have something that says, here are the choices, and this is why we've decided to go in this direction. And instead, what we get is a budget line for asteroid redirect that doesn't say, here are the choices, but says, this is the choice we've made. So which is it? Have you all just ditched any other possibilities, and everything is focused on the asteroid redirect as the way to go to Mars? Because if that is true, then what's the point of providing a roadmap?
Congresswoman, the place we're going is Mars. Our ultimate focus is the journey to Mars, and everything comes back to that. When you talk about getting to Mars, we need high-energy solar electric propulsion. We need to be able to operate in and around low-gravity, no-gravity bodies. The asteroid redirect mission is going to provide that. We need a sustained low Earth orbit infrastructure from which we can operate. The International Space Station is vital to that. We've gotten the International Space Station agreed that we will extend it to 2024. That is essential. We have to supply the International Space Station. That takes us to commercial crew and cargo. I want to get away from dependence on the Russians. We now have American commercial cargo capability demonstrated. The importance of 2 providers was ultimately eminently demonstrated when we lost Antares and Cygnus last October, because when we launched SpaceX 6, it was loaded. It was loaded with everything that would have been on Cygnus. So without having 2 providers, redundancy in American providers, we would not have been able to do that. We are on the road to having commercial crew availability in 2017. So that's going to take us to Mars. If I don't have commercial crew and cargo, the International Space Station, I can't get to Mars.
My time is totally gone, but I'm just going to say to you that I think that this committee, many of us, want to figure out a way that we can best support the ultimate goal of Mars. But we have to have some level of communication with the committee, laying out what the alternatives are, what the choices are, and not just have you come to the committee and say, this is what we're doing. Our job is to take in the information and say, this is how we as a Congress, as an American people, feel that we need to go in this direction. And that hasn't happened yet. It would be a really good idea, offline, online, whatever it is, bring it into us, put it on paper, lay it out for us so that we have the ability in subsequent authorizations to help figure that out with you and not just be told a direction that we're going without any level of communication. Thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am.
That's fine. Thank you, Ms. Edwards. I now recognize Mr. Brooks for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General Bolden, the acronym NASA stands for the, quote, National Aeronautics and Space Administration, end quote. I underscore the words aeronautics and space. Yet each year, almost $2 billion of NASA funding is diverted from aeronautics and space to earth sciences, i.e. global warming and climate change and similar initiatives. To the extent America wishes to spend taxpayer money on global warming and climate change, I'd submit these programs should be paid for out of the Environmental Protection Agency's budget, not America's aeronautics and space budgets. General Bolden, given a choice between adequately funding NASA's aeronautics and space efforts, such as the Space Launch System, the various telescopes, planetary sciences, and things of that nature, so that America's space program is no longer reduced to hitching a ride from Russia to get to the space station, and diverting NASA funding to the study of the Earth's environment, a subject I submit is better suited to the Environmental Protection Agency. What is your preference and why?
Congressman Brooks, the NASA, since its inception, has had responsibility for exploring the universe and helping us understand it better, and also taking care of this planet, which I think, it happens to be my favorite planet. If I followed the logic that you just presented, since science is missing from the acronym, and people have suggested that NASA drop science from its programs because it's not in the acronym. However, that would be absurd to do that. NASA is eminently responsible for science, and we provide 4 areas of science, or science, astrophysics, planetary science, and heliophysics. And that is our portfolio, and we cover that adequately with the funds that we are given. We are able to do things. We provide instruments and satellites that are used by other operational agencies. We don't do weather forecasting. We don't do operational science.
I understand that. If I could please interject for a moment. My question is one of choice. Do you want aeronautics and space money, NASA money, going to aeronautics and space? Are you comfortable with a diversion of about $2 billion a year to global warming, climate change initiatives, which in my judgment should be funded by the Environmental Protection Agency, thereby freeing up that $2 billion for aeronautics and space?
Congressman, my choice is to distribute the money in the best way that we feel possible to cover our portfolio, because we do feel that science, aeronautics, human exploration, and technology development are critical missions or critical functions that NASA has to do. We don't divert money from science for human exploration. We don't divert money from human exploration for science. We present what we think is a logical budget that will enable us to achieve all of our missions in a time that we lay out in those budgets, and I think we're doing that very well.
Well, General Bolden, if I might continue, in my opinion, based upon what I have seen since the cancellation of the shuttle program, since America has been reduced to hitching a ride from the Russians for our astronauts, America is losing ground and could arguably no longer be the preeminent space program, which was a position we've held since the 1960s. Given this choice, if Congress were to shift NASA Earth Sciences funding, roughly $2 billion a year, to restoring America's preeminence in space and requiring that global warming and climate change study be paid out of the Environmental Protection Agency's existing budget, so that you still have that kind of earth science being funded, but out of the Environmental Protection Agency, which seems to be a more logical agency since we're talking about the environment, would you support that shift of $2 billion a year to NASA's aeronautics and space programs, with the understanding that the EPA would be doing the environmental work on global warming and climate change?
Mr. Chairman, there is only one agency that sends people to space, as you all have said. That's NASA. Right now, there is a preeminent agency that provides the instrumentation that gathers the data to do the work of EPA and NOAA and others that you say. If we stop doing that, there is no other agency that does it. The reason that our Earth Science budget had an increase this year was because we build satellites for NOAA.
There's nothing that would stop the EPA out of their budget from hiring NASA to put those satellites up there, is there?
That's what we do right now. So
Well,
why do it and pretend we're not doing it?
But right now it's cutting into the space program, I would submit, and as a consequence, I think you've got a very good argument out there that America is losing ground, and the highest ground in that space. And we're doing it because aeronautics and space has not been adequately funded over the years. Now, I'm trying to figure out a way to improve funding for aeronautics and space, and if I understand correctly, here you are, the NASA administrator, and you're saying, no, we don't want that $2 billion for aeronautics and space, and we don't want the Environmental Protection Agency to take over an environmental issue, which would be global warming and climate change initiatives. Am I erring in my interpretation of your remarks?
Congressman Brooks, if you're saying that I disagree that we should take the money that NASA has in Earth Science and shift it to aeronautics and space, you're absolutely right. I disagree. I think that the balance of funds that NASA has today in our science, human exploration, aeronautics, and space technology portfolios is about right. And I believe that if this, the other thing is, I am really sorry that you don't believe that we are the preeminent agency in the world for exploration in space. I just came back from the Space Symposium, and there's no one out there who agrees with anyone who has that low opinion of NASA and the United States. We are the preeminent leader in the world, always have been, always will be.
Well, let me break it down. When it comes to human spaceflight, we are no longer the preeminent country in space. When it comes to non-human space endeavors, I think you can make an argument that America still has preeminence. But when you put the two together, and when Russia is reducing the United States of America to saying if we want to go to their space station, we can do it via trampoline, that's not the kind of preeminence that at least I'm accustomed to, having seen the Saturn V rocket built, researched, and developed in the 5th Congressional District of Alabama.
The gentleman's time has expired.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
At this time, I recognize Mr. Byer for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General and Administrator, NASA's Wallops Flight Facility in Mid-Atlantic Regional Spaceport play a critical role in our nation's launch infrastructure, providing half of the cargo resupply launches to the ISS, as well as other important NASA and DoD missions. It's one of only 4 operational sites in the U.S. capable of orbital launch, and only one of 2 on the East Coast capable of supporting NASA's human spaceflight program. And it's my understanding that last year Wallops nearly tied Vandenberg, AFB, for the number of launches. And last fall, the Congress, with bipartisan and bicameral support, appropriated $20 million for NASA's Wallops for the long overdue launch range upgrades, as well as to support recovery from the Orb 3 accident last October. I was pleased to learn that the first $5 million was actually, of the appropriated funding, was released last week. But I think I and all the Virginia delegation are concerned about 5 months after the bill signed into law, the other $15 million still hasn't flowed into Wallops. Can you tell me when that funding is going to come to Wallops and what the delay might be?
Congressman, we have continued to build Wallops up to what we consider to be a 21st century launch complex. It is our intent that Wallops will be returned to the capability of launching medium and low class orbital vehicles, and we will see that when Orbital Sciences is ready to launch again, the facility will be fully up and running. But if you look at the funds that we have expended through the years at Wallops, we don't count a particular pot, for work on the pad or whatever. We're trying to restore it to a 21st century launch complex. The $5 million that we contributed to the repairs on the pad were because we took the leadership in trying to get the 3 teams together, meaning Orbital, Mars, and the state of Virginia, to move, to get some movement on restoring the pad. So we felt it was essential to do that. I would have to remind people that what is not counted, because it wasn't in our budget, but we were able to find ways to do it, was how did we get Wallops to the point where it could launch in the first place? We brought people up from Stennis. We brought people up from Kennedy. We brought people up from Langley to enable Mars and the state of Virginia to have an operating launch pad. So we have always supported Wallops with funds over and above what shows up in the budget for particular budget lines. So
Thank you, gentlemen.
I pledge we'll continue that.
We look forward to the other $15 million. That would be great. I was very impressed with this notion of constancy of purpose and our ranking member Edwards' concerns. Much is made of it, and reading through all this, you see there's so much on your plate. Just look at the budget: exploration, space operations, science, aeronautics, education, etc. In specific programs, SLS, Orion, Commercial Crew, JWST, Heliophysics, Earth Science, etc. Mars, exoplanets, ISS, Landsat. Is there any way you can tell me what NASA's constancy of purpose actually is?
Oh, Mars is the planet that is most like Earth. It is the one that we believe may sustain life, probably did sustain some type of life, and will sustain life when humans get there in the 2030s. It is critical for us to understand Mars like every other planet in our solar system so that we better understand planet Earth. We've been exploring Mars for about 40 years. Every precursor has been with one purpose in mind, and that's being able to put humans on that planet one of these days. That is the reason we have Curiosity there. That's the reason we're going to put Mars 2020 there. The reason we're going to launch InSight next year.
So is it safe to say, if I'm explaining NASA's constancy of purpose to a high school physics student, I say you can look at all of this through the lens of Mars?
That is one example, and it depends on, if you're talking to kids in high school, some of them are going to have no interest in planetary science. So some of them may be interested, they may be techies, and then I need to be able to show them the constancy of purpose in NASA Space Technology Mission Directorate that's enabling them, like the young people back here from Carnegie Mellon, in a university that's noted for its computer science. So they've got to believe they can come to NASA and contribute also.
I was clear, and now I'm confused again. It sounds like we have just a huge buffet at NASA rather than a single focus or a single constancy of purpose. Is there a way to define it clearly? Especially when it comes to, we opened with all the concerns about, we cut money from this, we added money to that, and where was our constancy of purpose? So.
When I talk about constancy of purpose, I'm really talking about exploration, and that is the primary focus of this agency in trying to keep up with the charter that established NASA in 1958, to understand our universe. We believe that if we can put humans on Mars, our journey, if we can shore up our journey to Mars and say, we're going there. We may wander along the way, as people always do when they're on a journey, but that's the ultimate destination. Here's the plan that we have in place that Congresswoman Edwards mentioned. We have three things we've got to do. We're Earth-reliant right now. We've got to get away from being Earth-reliant, and that means we've got to spend some time in the proving zone. We've got to go back to the lunar environment, so we'll be in cislunar space. And ultimately, we want to be Mars-ready. We want to be Earth-independent. So it takes all of these little pieces that I mentioned. Congressman Perlmutter just came in. He's one of my biggest cheerleaders for MAVEN. We've got to understand Mars's environment and what happened to it in order to understand Earth's environment right now and what might happen to it if the magneto gets turned off.
The gentleman's time has expired. At this time, I'd like to recognize Chairman Smith for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, let me say at the outset that I think we have heard excellent questions today from both sides of the podium. I still think we're searching for more direct answers to a lot of those questions. And to that end, Director Bolden, let me go back to the asteroid redirect mission for a second. It is amazing to me that the administration actually thinks that changing this mission from securing an asteroid and taking it into orbit and part around the moon, and now changing it to getting a boulder from an asteroid and putting it in orbit, and is going to somehow attract the American people's attention and inspire them. But the main point I want to make here is that the NASA Advisory Council actually made a recommendation to you all, and it found, quote, Instead of relocating a boulder from an asteroid, we suggest that a more important and exciting first use of this new solar electric propulsion stage would be a round-trip mission to Mars, flying it to Mars orbit, and then back to the Earth-Moon system and into a distant retrograde lunar orbit. Why isn't the administration following its own experts' advice?
Congressman Smith, I believe that we are going to stand a better chance.
So you disagree with your experts? And maybe you're entitled to do that.
I agree with some of my experts who happen to think that the asteroid redirect mission is
the
awesome.
last 2 years, all the experts have recommended against the ARM mission, and you all keep forging ahead.
With all due respect, Mr. Chairman, if I lined up the experts and had them sit
Charlie,
up there,
all
it would
these
probably
experts
be
have been
50,
unanimous.
50 or 60.
These experts have been unanimous in not recommending the ARM mission, and you all just keep forging ahead. And I'm asking you, why are you ignoring all these experts' advice?
Mr. Chairman, because I believe in constancy of purpose. I believe that my job is to determine the direction in which this agency is going to go, recommend it to you and to the President, and then pick that path and follow it. We are on a path.
Director, I'd rather you listen to the experts more than maybe yourself in this particular instance.
I don't listen. I listen to the experts, and
Well, I wish you would heed them and do what they recommend. But on that same subject of ARM, and another example of what I'm talking about, NASA's Advisory Council also said that you should conduct an independent cost estimate of ARM, and so far you have not committed to doing so. Will you commit today to conducting that cost estimate of ARM and the 2 mission options?
We committed to the.
That's a pretty easy answer, yes or no.
We committed because what you say we committed or what they recommended.
Right.
We committed to them that when we get to beyond the mission concept review, which we have now done, that we will have an independent cost assessment done.
Now, when can we expect to see that independent cost estimate, since you're now to that point?
I will get that to you, sir. We are not. I don't have a date for an independent cost assessment on the option that we've selected for ARM.
Do you have a month?
Mr. Chairman, I will take that for the record, and I will get to you.
Is it this year, in the next 6 months, next 3 months?
Mr. Chairman, I will take it for the record, and I will get back to you.
Okay, you're kind of proving what I said about these answers. All right, let me go to the next one. You proposed an overall cut in planetary science by $76 million, Orion by $98 million, SLS by $344 million, and you've cut other space programs as well. That's why I happen to think the administration is starting NASA. But in regard to SLS and Orion, those over $400 million worth of cuts, you've got a situation where the GAO has said those $400 million cuts are a risk to the program. And now the launch date has gone from 2017 to 2018. It seems to me that the administration's actions contradict their words, because if you look at the money, Earth science may be a priority, but space is less of a priority.
Mr. Chairman.
If you look at the money, can you come to any other conclusion?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I would say, I would request that people look at performance, that you look at achievement. I would ask people to look at the fact that we flew Orion in December.
But if you look at the budget, and you're cutting space and you're increasing Earth science, doesn't that suggest that the administration has a greater priority for Earth science than space?
Mr. Chairman, if we look at the money we spent, since this administration has come into office, we have spent $49 billion on human
I understand
space.
all that. If you look at the cuts, don't cuts mean something?
Cuts mean that we are trying to select priorities and get the missions and
That's my
goals.
point. Your priority is not space, it's something else.
Our priority is very clear. We are on a journey to Mars. We are trying to continue to get support from this Congress and the administration on that journey to Mars. We have demonstrated that we know what we're doing.
Then why did you cut the space programs? You have SLS slipping a year. You're not going the right direction if space is a priority. I'm not saying it's not a priority, but it's less of a priority because of what those cuts represent.
Mr. Chairman, we have provided an availability for launch date for SLS in the ground launch system as we have gone through our formal process of evaluating
But isn't
schedules.
it, and it's gone from 2017 to 2018.
We never presented a formal finding. We did not go through the formal process when we came up with a date of 2017. It's like Europa. I think I can do Europa in 2029. We will know what
You don't
the date
consider
is gonna be once we
2017
go-
to 2018 to be a delay then?
I do not consider it to be a delay, Mr.
Mr.
Chairman.
Chairman, this may be
because-
the only administration in history that doesn't consider going from 2017 to 2018 being a delay. I happen to think it is. I'll yield back. My time has expired.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At this time, the chair recognizes Mr. Perlmutter for 5 minutes.
Okay, Mo, did I do you?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Administrator Bolden, good to see you. I do think that Chairman Smith and I are in total agreement on our desire to get our astronauts to Mars and to be very focused in that respect. And there are obviously other things that need to be done, whether it's looking back at Earth or looking farther into space. I would take issue with a couple of my colleagues. To me, NASA is by far the preeminent space exploration agency in the world. Now, I think what's important, and I think the real problem here, and the chairman and I have had this conversation, is that I think we can get to Mars, and I would like to see us accelerate the time frame of us getting to Mars and do the other things that are important in terms of weather satellites and a number of the other responsibilities that you all take on. And I'd like to pull up a chart because I think this is the real problem, and we've had this conversation. So this is NASA's budget as a percentage of the federal budget over the last 40 years. And so as a result, we see when in the early years in 68 and through 62 through 68, where your budget peaked, which was our effort to get to the moon, and it succeeded. But we had, as a nation, we had to dedicate ourselves to doing that, and it cost us money. And since then, we have not been prepared as a nation to make it the priority that it was back then. And so you then are in a position where you have finite resources, which I think are too low for your agency, if our goal is to get to Mars and get there sometime within my lifetime. I want to see us get there by 2020. I have no idea exactly how you can do it, but I want to make sure you have the resources to do it and to do the other things that are important to the mission, whether it's MAVEN and understanding the atmosphere and what the heck happened, as a precursor to us going to Mars. And so I'd like you just to kind of respond to my rant, if you would, and your budget as a percentage of federal spending.
Congressman, I appreciate your rant, to be quite honest, and in many ways you're correct. But I don't want people to lose sight of what we've been doing over the last 40 years. We have been flying robotic precursors throughout this solar system for 40-some-odd years now. We have been on Mars, the only nation in the world to successfully land an operating vehicle on Mars. So those precursors are very important to our human journey to Mars. We can't get there without the precursor missions because there are things we still don't understand. We can't get there without developing the technologies such as solar electric propulsion. We can't get there without developing the techniques such as operating in and around low gravity and no gravity bodies, all things that the ARM mission we hope will do. We can't get there without commercial crew and cargo. We have to get away from reliance on the Russians. When we lost Columbia, nobody planned for that. The only way we were able to sustain our occupancy of the International Space Station was to call on our partners, the Russians, and to rely on them for a period of time. That has been far too long. With the funding that this budget requested, we can return launch of our astronauts to American soil, and that is absolutely critical. I don't think, when it gets down to the basic fundamental question here, I don't think there's any disagreement between me and anybody on this panel. We all want to get humans to Mars. There is a correct way to do that, and we cannot do it by saying we're going to fly a one-way mission or we're going to fly a solar electric propulsion vehicle out and bring it back. There is a progression through which we have to go. We've got to go from being Earth-reliant, go to the proving ground, and then get on out to Mars and be Mars-ready. And those are programs that are slow developing. that take time to make sure that we're doing the right thing, and that's what we're doing. We are trying to institute constancy.
So I do want to thank you, and I felt it was a very successful mission, the first test flight of Orion, and I do want to see us accelerate. So to some degree, I do agree with the chairman. You know, if we can continue to have our major focus getting to Mars, that's what I would like to see it be. But I think we've got to, if that's the kind of mission and dedication we have, you have to see some increase in your budget so that we can do all the steps necessary to get us there and get us there promptly. Because if we're going to really have a mission that the nation can embrace and embrace enthusiastically, like they did that first test flight, we've got to keep it moving. You can't have too much time lag through this process. And with that, I have a whole bunch of other questions, but I'll save those for my next round. I yield back to the chairman.
I want to thank the gentleman. At this time, the chair recognizes Mr. Rohrbacher for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. The one thing that I've learned in my life is that people who try to do everything for everybody end up not being able to do anything for anybody. And that's why it's so important to make sure that we have goals in mind that are achievable as a package rather than just independently. Each goal is an important goal. And I would just have to say that I believe that we are not doing that. And I say we, and I don't mean just you. I mean all of us. We're part of the team that's, we are America's space team. And it's not just NASA, it's all of us in this committee as well. I think we have overreached, and it will prevent us from accomplishing some very important goals that we hear the arguments, and I think they're legitimate arguments, about having NASA being involved in global warming research and other things that shouldn't be priorities. I understand the position you're in, and you're doing a good job in defending what the administration's goals are, and the administration hired you on to this job to do this. But let me just say, I don't think that we are going to achieve the goals, even the important goals, unless we start being more realistic. Let me ask you, I of course have been one who's been over the years promoting, rather than the trip to Mars, I've been promoting utilizing the commercial involvement in space in order to let us accomplish things that are accomplishable in space. And the Commercial Crew launch system and by your own budgets have suggested that the idea of going the more commercial direction actually is a valid methodology of achieving our space goals, or certain space goals, at a cost-effective way. And I understand that, of course, we're now dependent on the Russians to buy 6 seats per year from the Russians in order to maintain the space station at a cost of $76 million per seat. Is that correct?
That's approximate, sir.
Okay.
Presently.
And basically, we are looking forward to the fact that the commercial crew program will free us from that obligation. And however, just a 2-year delay in what we have expected from commercial crew, we have a 2-year delay. That, by my calculation, is $900 million extra that we're spending for the Russians, because the commercial crew formula has had to be pushed off for 2 years. Is that right?
That is correct, sir, and that is a delay. When I came into this position and we presented the commercial crew program to this Congress and the administration, we proposed a level of funding that would have had us launching this year. We did not get that level of funding. We did not get the continuous support, and so we now hope to launch in 2017.
Well,
if we don't get what we asked for this year, then because we now are working on contracts.
Well, General, let me note that I agree with what you're saying, and the reason why you didn't get the money is because we're draining money off for other projects, like flying off to Mars in the long run, and costing us almost $1 billion because we're not doing things responsibly. That's a $1 billion waste as far as that I'm concerned. And let me just put it this way: if you are calculating that a commercial crew approach and doing this through a commercial rather than doing it through the old system that we had is actually going to save money in the long run, why are we? And we're pouring at the same time pouring money into global warming, that stuff, but also in the SLS and the Mars concept of putting a man on Mars rather than just rely on robots. Don't we have? There's been some indication by one of the companies that's providing us commercial crew, SpaceX, that the owner of that company has said, well, he himself is interested in financing a trip to Mars. So if we have recognized that there is validity to letting the private sector get involved in this, why are we spending so much money in the long run on Mars, which is costing us money in the short run because we're not budgeting correctly? Why don't we just hold off on spending money and going to Mars to see if the private sector can contribute to that effort?
Mr. Chairman, or Mr. Congressman, the reason we're spending the money on it, or we're investing, is because experience has told us that only nations do the things that we're trying to do. Commercial companies will follow, I hope. Commercial companies followed us to low Earth orbit. We now have two companies that provide cargo support, and hopefully 2 years from now we'll provide crew support. But that's only because we blazed the trail. I don't care what anyone says, getting to Mars is hard. And there is no commercial company that, without the support of the government and without the support of NASA, is going to independently take a trip to Mars. So I would hope that no one on this committee buys into that.
So let me note that the same thing could have been said in terms of providing transportation to government programs for astronauts. Same thing could have been said about the commercial sector 10, 20 years ago. The private sector has a lot to contribute, and I would hope that we don't have our long-term projection into Mars as a government program doesn't cost us these extra billions of dollars that could be put to use by NASA or by the private sector in accomplishing some goals right now. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you,
Mr. Chairman.
I want to thank the gentleman. At this time, the chair recognizes the ranking member of the full committee, Mrs. Johnson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and I apologize for being late. I had an essential meeting that I had to attend, and let me welcome the administrator and thank you for your long time and continued service to this nation. As the chairman and others have indicated, we are here to review NASA's fiscal year 2016 budget request. And before I discuss specifics, I'd like to say that I appreciate the President's commitment to NASA as expressed in this budget request, as well as his support for R&D overall. It is clear that he understands the importance of investing in our nation's R&D enterprise, of which NASA is a key component. So while I may differ on some of the specific funding decisions reflected in this budget request, I think that NASA's overall request is a good starting point for our deliberations, and I hope that Congress will at least equal that budgetary top line, if not exceed it. Because the reality is that successive Congresses and administrations have tasked NASA with a number of critical important endeavors, and yet we have lagged in providing the resources needed to carry them out. The truth is that NASA's buying power has actually decreased, as it has been pointed out here, by 15% from fiscal year 2005 to fiscal year 2013. and is expected to continue to decline if the budgetary outlook doesn't improve. So, Mr. Chairman, the hard-working men and women of NASA really does deserve better. Let me cite an example. Just about a year ago, a distinguished panel of the National Academies completed its review of the nation's human space exploration program. The panel was headed by former governor and OMB director Mitch Daniels, an individual well known for his fiscal conservatism, which makes the panel's conclusions even more impressive. Namely, America's human space flight program is worth continuing. Mars is the appropriate goal. The government needs to come to a consensus on a pathway to Mars. And I don't believe that commercially it's going to happen until first the government reaches it. A set of interim destinations and milestones, of course, and it's going to require funding above the constant dollars if NASA is to succeed. So that's pretty unambiguous advice that we have failed to follow. So it came as a bit of a shock to me that the very next budget request for NASA to be submitted after the report's release would actually propose cutting the funding for the Space Launch System of the Orion, two fundamental enabling elements of the human exploration program. It's directly counter to the National Academy's findings, and I think that Congress needs to correct that. Neither has NASA yet told us how it plans to get to Mars. What's the pathway or the roadmap? NASA needs to look beyond just the next 4 or 5 years and lay out the milestones it needs to pursue to get humans on Mars, as the National Academy's panel made clear. Defining such a roadmap is not just for NASA's benefit. None of what NASA has done has been for NASA's benefit as such. It has benefited our nation and our world. Congress and the American people will need to be confident that NASA has a well thought out plan if we are going to be able to sustain support for such an ambitious understanding over the coming years. I'm sure we will discuss further during this hearing, and so I won't pursue this any further now. NASA is a crown jewel of America's research and development enterprise. It advances knowledge, promotes technological innovation, projects a positive image of America throughout the world, and inspires, especially our young minds. Its workforce is dedicated and accomplished, and I really do think that NASA deserves our support. I want to ask this question as my time is running out. How does NASA employees beyond your leadership feel in terms of their confidence of gaining greater steps toward reaching Mars and the goals for getting there when we are not providing the adequate money?
Congresswoman, I'm a person who believes in metrics. The best metric we have for how NASA employees feel is something that's called, it's done by the Partnership for Public Service, and it results in a listing of best places to work in the federal government. For the last 3 years, the #1 place to work in the federal government in our class has been NASA, and I think that speaks to the attitude, the enthusiasm, the excitement of the people in the agency. I just came back from Georgia Tech last week. Young people want to come work for us because they're excited about what we're doing, and they want to do things that have not been done before. They are excited about Mars, the workforce. There are all kinds of intangible things that you do that tell you what the attitude of a workforce is. If you go over there right now, we're engaged in a fitness challenge that goes over the next 2 weeks or so. I mean, people stepping in line as they order their sandwiches. That may not seem like a significant thing to most people, but to us that says that we have a workforce of 18,000 people who are enthusiastic about what they're doing, who are excited, and who believe we can deliver on the things that we say we can deliver. We're on a journey to Mars. We have a plan to get there, and we have delivered on that plan. As we go through the budget horizons, within the budget horizon, we've flown Orion into space. We've tested the RS-25 rockets that are going to go on the first 2 missions We've fired the solid rocket booster out in Utah. We have done the things that are inside the budget horizon because that was a concrete plan with money put toward it. We talk to your staffs about 20, 30 years out. And so I would hope that they all were very much aware of the deliberations that were going on the asteroid redirect mission. The fact that we had two options, that we were looking at two options, that we came to the decision that we did because we were looking for the best option that supported the journey to Mars and kept us on that journey. So I hope that if you talk to any of my employees, they would tell you that they're excited about what we're doing.
Thank you. My time has expired.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. At this time, the chair recognizes Mr. Lucas for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, General, for being here today. Clearly, many of our colleagues are very concerned about how we not only maintain the flow of scientific accomplishments and the support of the American public, and a great deal of focus here has been on Mars and what it requires to get there. Let me take you back for a moment, though, a little closer to home, and let's talk about the James Webb Space Telescope. There are a few things, I think, that have caught the imagination of the public to the degree that the Hubble has over the course of the last 25 years. Tremendous science, but it's also brought the American public along with us. James Webb, with its literally quantum leap forward, I personally believe has the ability to continue that attention span, the American public. But let's talk for a moment about the process of getting that done. The delays we've gone through, the setbacks, some of the challenges with the cryocooler. Do you believe that the telescope will still be able to launch on schedule and still be within budget?
Chairman, Mr. Congressman, I firmly believe, because I have personally been involved in the oversight of the James Webb Space Telescope from the time we brought our restructured plan to this Congress and to the White House. So I can speak with confidence that we're on schedule and below cost right now for delivering James Webb in 2018. I think we will make that. You mentioned the cryocooler. That presented a technological challenge that, we always know that there are going to be difficult things. But I work with Wes Bush, the chairman of Northrop Grumman Corporation. We have telecons every month. Because we both realize the significance of the James Webb Space Telescope. So it is something that I take very seriously, and I think we're going to launch in 2018.
And the differences, of course, between Hubble and James Webb, where we're putting out in orbit, the fact that we can't repair it, it has to be perfect the first time.
That's the challenge.
One of the miracles of NASA was the fix on Hubble early on, one of the great accomplishments. Tell me, James Webb is a rather substantial portion of your budget and has been in recent years. Hopefully we're on the verge of completion of that. Where do you envision that slice of the pie winding up when it's not committed to the development and the testing and the launching of James Webb?
That slice of the pie that some people refer to as a wedge is what is now going into the planning for the non-budget years, the out years, 20, 30 years out. And there are a number of projects that are being considered W-FIRST and AFTA, an advanced telescope for space, telescopes on the moon. There are any number of things that the science community has no shortage of ways that they would like to spin the wedge. But I assure you that we have what we call a strategic implementation planning process, where we try to look at the things that come in. We help inform the decadal surveys, which Chairman Smith referred to. But we will get input in the planetary decadal survey, for example, in 2021. So we're trying to do our research and inform them now such that when they recommend something to us, it is something that is achievable.
But once again, Director, your personal involvement demonstrates the importance of the James Webb and
critically
enhances
important.
your level of confidence that we'll get there on time, on budget, and in the way that we need to be. Let's come even a little closer to home, so to speak, for just a moment to that, and discuss the unmanned aerial systems. NASA is expected to complete the Build 1 of the UAS Traffic Management System, UTM, in fiscal 2016 to help integrate all of this into the National Aerospace System. I guess my question is, when we've talked about private challenges and opportunities in all of these areas, explain to me again why NASA is taking the lead on this traffic management instead of somebody in the private industry.
Because we have the expertise, you know, with, you look at the Langley Research Center and Ames Research Center, and to some extent Glenn, we have the national capability, the national expertise is resident in NASA. We could pass it off to industry, except people like working for us. And so people come to NASA when they want an answer about things that deal with aeronautics. And we're very proud of the packages that we have delivered to the FAA and to the airlines. For example, there is an en route traffic management package that we delivered to the FAA that's being tested by American Airlines, primarily out of Dallas. I went down and worked with them or talked to them several months ago, and they are thrilled with the package. We have a departure package is in the hands of U.S. Airways down at Charlotte right now. We're working on unmanned aerial systems, trying to help the FAA go about revising their regulations so that people can get unmanned aerial systems into the National Air Transportation System.
Are you confident, General, that we're going to wind up with a system that can support what potentially will be a very complex environment out there with the interest shown by industry and everyone? It's hard to tell just where this will ultimately lead to.
I'm very confident that we will make advances. I am not confident that we will stay ahead of industry and entrepreneurs. So, you know, as you said, NASA can only do so much. We work with the FAA. We work with the Department of Defense. We're working with industry. We're working with everyone. But the pace of spending on technology is not keeping up with the pace of innovation on the part of the private sector. And that's why when we talk about needing money for NASA's space technology program, that is not just about space. The space technology program looks across much of their work is done to support the Science Mission Directorate. We've got to put more money into technology development if we're going to keep pace with the private sector. Otherwise, they'll dwarf us.
Thank you, General. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
At this time, the chair recognizes Mr. Knight for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And General, I have a couple of questions. I know a lot of people have been talking about the A in aeronautics in NASA, and so I have a few questions, but I would like to make a couple comments that I do believe that it is a top goal to go to Mars. I think that is a laudable goal for humankind. I think that over the last 60 years, we've seen quite a lot of jumps and leaps, and in your business, you can't jump a step, because when you do, you lose data and you lose lives. So I understand that very well. There are a couple systems in aeronautics that have made our lives better and have made our warfighter better, and I know that Ranking Member Edwards hit on one with the winglets on our airliners, but you have a couple systems that have gone into place in the last couple of years, like our GCAT and our collision avoidance for our warfighter being now employed in our F-16s in their day-to-day efforts, and also with the F-15 sonic boom jousting that you did much testing on in the last 5 or 10 years, which I appreciate, because if you could ever do that, then I wouldn't have a 5-hour flight back to California. I'd have an hour-and-a-half flight. So I appreciate all of those missions in aeronautics. I don't appreciate the 3% budgeting for aeronautics, and I think that that's a bone of contention, probably with many people on this dais, and I'm sure we can talk about that. But one of the programs that was talked about was the James Webb, and it is true. Once the Webb telescope goes, it's gone. But there is a telescope that we bring back to Earth every day, and we fly it about 3 or 4 times a week, and that's SOFIA. SOFIA takes up 4th and 5th grader teachers and does great science projects about 3 or 4 times a week. It's a joint mission with Germany. I know you know this very well. And Germany has just placed a whole bunch of money in reconfiguring and redoing the SOFIA telescope. So I'd like to hear a little bit of the status of SOFIA, the future of SOFIA, because there's been such changes that we're going to have a senior review by about 18 or 19, which would have been 5 years into the project, which is, that's about right. And now we've heard that we're going to be in spring of 2016, which is only 2 years into its fully operational period. Yeah. So I'd like to hear just a little bit of status on Sophia.
Congressman Knight, Sophia is doing awesome, as you said. It represents a unique capability in that it is an airborne platform, and we can change out the instruments on it. That's the advantage we have there. The reason that we moved the senior review up was very similar to the reason that we had an early senior review with Hubble. In the early days of Hubble, the senior review was scheduled to be years away. We knew that we were going to want to upgrade the observatory. And in order to do that, the best way to do it was to hold a senior review to look at both the present performance, but also what are the things that we need to be thinking about in the future to enhance its ability to perform. So the senior review is not just to determine whether or not it's performing and whether it's worth the money we spend on it, but will also give us some guidance as we go forward about what we should think about for future instruments. So I would say, you know, an important part of the future of Sophia is how much are our German partners going to be willing to put in, because it is a partnership. It's a critical partnership. But if they say that we're not going to put in any more money, so you pay for it, then that puts us at a
No, sir, and I agree. It is a partnership, and I think that their commitment, because of the refurb and all of the work that they've done in the last year, is. But I will go back to aeronautics and talk about this just a little bit more in my last 45 seconds. You know, we're going to move forward with other programs out in aeronautics, and they're going to enhance our lives, and they're going to help us survive in a crash, help us maybe maintain a better lifestyle. Intelligent flight control systems, I know, is something that that NASA is working on, and I appreciate NASA for doing digital fly-by-wire and all of the kind of experiments to get us up to this. So that's what I will say. With the 3%, it doesn't look like the commitment to aeronautics is as much as it has been in the last 40 years. And part of that might be because we don't have a solid X-plane mission. And if we would revisit the X-plane mission, and I know that that's something that you've talked about, and I know that that's something that NASA's talked about, but in today's age, an X-plane mission might be a joint effort, not with the Air Force, but with a private industry. And you've seen that with other things like the Dream Chaser or other programs. So that is my request, that we revisit that.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much,
Mr. Chair.
The chair wants to recognize Mr. Johnson for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General Bolden, you and I have had chances to talk. I think you know that I'm a big NASA fan. You know, from Buck Rogers to James Kirk to the real life accomplishments of John Glenn and Neil Armstrong and so many other pioneers of space travel. I'm one who believes that regardless of the mission, that the sciences, technologies, and great marvels of discovery that have been realized through our space program have bettered our country and have bettered the world in so many ways. So that is a backdrop for my questions. Just one right up front, General Bolden. Does NASA believe, do you believe, that the asteroid mission will help with planetary defense, which is contrary to the findings of the Small Bodies Assessment Group and the asteroid experts?
Congressman Johnson, as I have said before, I don't want to overpromise or overcommit, but we believe that the asteroid redirect mission, when flown, and if the science is the way that we think it is, will inform those who follow us in developing concrete technologies and systems to deflect asteroids or to protect the planet, if you will. So it will contribute to our ability to deflect asteroids, and that's why I told both Congressman Posey and Congressman Brooks I can answer the question today. I couldn't 2 years ago. We have a plan to do that.
Okay. General Bolden, you know, the United States is presently sanctioning the Russian Federation in the field of high-tech exports as a result of Russia's actions in the Ukraine. Last summer, the Russian Deputy Prime Minister Dmitry Rogozin even threatened to cut off American access to the station, saying that we could get there by jumping on a trampoline if we wanted to. What absurdity. If the Russian Federation followed through on these threats and withdrew cooperation, how would the space station be affected?
Congressman Johnson, we have a plan today. When people ask me about my contingency plan, we're 2 years away from having our own capability of sending our crews to the International Space Station. That will take us away from reliance on the Russians. We currently are, contrary to what's in the paper and the political and diplomatic relations between the two countries, station continues to be the perfect example, the role model, if you will, for international relations and collaboration and cooperation.
Let me point out, General Bolden, you know, in kind of a explanatory to what some of my colleagues have said. This is what we mean, what you just commented on there, that we're 2 years away from being able to deliver to the space station ourselves. We can't disregard what's in the media. We can't disregard the public perception. And when we tell you, and I'm one that agrees that we are and we will remain forever the premier space explorer in the world. I understand that. The general public does not. And when they see and they read in the media that we have to hitchhike with the Russians to the space station, that's the perception that is out there. And you know as well as I do that reality is oftentimes dictated by perception. It's not reality. If absolutely necessary, then could Boeing or SpaceX send a human mission to the space station in the near future?
No. If you're calling the near future sooner than 2017, no.
Okay. All right. Do you think NASA could down select to one provider immediately and devote all of its resources to be ready sooner? Any planned mitigation that you could do to get us ready sooner?
I think that the path on which we are currently embarked with two providers, it maintains competition. Yeah. It guarantees that I will have the safest vehicle possible. And I think if we down selected to one, it would not speed up the process at all. It may even slow it down, because then that one provider becomes the monopoly that dictates to me what it can or can't do and what it will and won't do. We have fixed price contracts with them today, and I can tell you, it's interesting to engage with the two providers in discussions about what we think the vehicle should be able to do, because they know that if they don't perform, they have a contract right now that's for up to 6 missions. Mm-hmm. It is not a good business model to say I'm going to fly 6 missions and then I'm going to get out of this. So they all want to be the contractor for life for a commercial crew. They want to perform.
I get that. And, of course, from your background, you understand the relevance of the question. The Russians are getting increasingly testy with their rhetoric, with their boldness, with their trouncing upon their European friends and neighbors. Everything from cutting off gas supplies to forcing us to jump on a trampoline to get to the space station. So what happens over the next 2 years if tomorrow the Russians were to say, you're out? What would we do? What's NASA's plan?
Well, Congressman Johnson, first of all, the Russians can't say you're out, because it is not a Russian or an American space station. The Russians can decide to withdraw from the International Space Station, which we'd have to adjust, but as I have said before, we would not.
But what if they were to say, we're not taking your people up there? What would happen? Because they could certainly say that. We might get mad about it, and we might try to bring world pressure.
Congressman, and I hate dealing in whatever we call them.
Now, don't go there, because you in your background, you got to have contingency plans for every outcome.
And that's why I said we have probably the best contingency plan possible, considering where this nation is. And that contingency plan is to fully support Boeing and SpaceX to flying in 2017.
No, I'm asking you what you're going to do over the next 2 years if the Russians say you're not going.
I am going to continue to work with my Russian partners to continue to encourage them to be as enthusiastic about maintaining the International Space Station as they are now. I would call it to everyone's attention, the same Deputy Prime Minister Rogozin, who was going to put me on a trampoline, tweeted out after my meeting with my counterpart that the Russians had decided that it's a good idea to stay with the space station until 2024.
Well, General,
that's what I do.
I respect you greatly, and I respect what NASA does, but what you've basically told me is that there is no option, there is no plan within the next 2 years if the Russians pull out, other than hoping like hell that they don't. And I would say I understand the pressures that you're under, and I understand that may be an avenue, but things have changed a lot over the last 2 years in our relationship with the Russians, and I hope somewhere in the dark rooms of NASA, you guys are considering what we're going to do if they pull the plug, because they could. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
The chair now recognizes Mr. Babin for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General Bolden, thank you for being here. Over the past several years, per the NASA Authorization Act of 2010, NASA has been systematically reducing its footprint and operational costs by closing various facilities, laboratories, and test structures. And it leaves many in the ranks and surrounding communities to question if a center closure perhaps is next. Relative to the Johnson Space Center, which is in my district, Texas 36, are you aware of any organization, government, university, or private sector proposed to any NASA officials or official at headquarters or at the center that management and operations centers be turned over to an academic institution or other entity similar to that of the Jet Propulsion Laboratory to operate as an FFRDC?
Congressman Babin, I am aware that is a recommendation that is out there forever. As long as I'm the NASA administrator, it is not a thing that I'm considering. So when you go back home to Houston, you can let people know there is no plan, not even the remotest plan, to accept a recommendation from the experts that we turn JSC into an FFRDC.
Okay.
That is not going to happen, not on my watch.
Well, I'm glad to hear that, because that is what's floating around out there around JSC, I can tell you that. All right, what would obviously your perspective on that? You obviously would not support that. That's
I am saying the way that we're organized today, we are constantly, we have something called TCAT. I hate to use another acronym. We're looking at our technical capabilities. We're trying to find out how in this budget environment we maximize the utilization of the talent that we have, and that determines what we do to facilities. I see us reducing facility footprint everywhere because we don't need the historic infrastructure that we've had. I do not see us reducing to the point where we close a center, not in the foreseeable future. I cannot say that, down the road, I don't know what will come when someone else is sitting in this chair as the NASA administrator, but there is nothing that we've done, no studies that we've conducted that say that would be the wise thing for us to do right now. We have one FFRDC, it is the Jet Propulsion Lab, and that serves our purpose.
okay. Thank you. It's good to hear that. All right, to follow up on my previous question relative to the agency's strategic planning and operational structure, are you confident that collectively the centers and their industry partners have the critical capabilities, resources, and infrastructure, as well as operational experience required to successfully implement the agency's core missions and objectives? And that would include engineering, mission operations, training, research, and systems development.
I'm confident that the pathway that we're on, the budget that we have, and the pathway on which we're embarked is actually shaped by the budget that we have, so that everybody remembers that. I'm confident that we have the right people, the right facilities, and the like. You're probably aware, Dr. Ellen Ochoa, the Center Director at Johnson, made a major change in her organizational structure because she was trying to get to where she thinks we need to be to support an exploration program. So, that's the prerogative of the team in the local areas as to how they organize to best do to help us accomplish the agency's strategic mission. And she has to have the flexibility to do that. That causes, a little fluffle, because that means we're not going to operate the same way we did yesterday. And I like the way we operated yesterday, if I happen to be a person who's affected by it. But all of our centers are making minor tweaks to be able to fit into the Mars pathway, if you will.
Right. Okay. So would you agree that JSC has a unique role in NASA's deep space exploration objective?
Now, if Ellen Ochoa decided she was going to pull out of the International Space Station, I'd be affected. I'd be worried. That they are vital.
Okay.
It's not like a threat from Russia pulling out of the International Space Station.
Absolutely.
That's where it's run. So that's the reason that, my contingency plan, again, going back to that, is to make sure that Ellen Ochoa and her team at the Johnson Space Center and Patrick Sherman and his team at Marshall, who happen to be the two primary centers for day-to-day operations of the International Space Station, make sure that they stay happy and appropriately occupied and manned, I don't know what the right term is, peopled, staffed. And as long as Marshall doing the science work for station and Johnson doing the human exploration, the human space flight preparation with our astronauts, as long as they're doing what they're doing and Kennedy stays doing what it's doing, all the centers continue to do what they're doing today, then we're strong, and we will continue to be the dominant operator of the International Space Station, on whom everyone depends, to include the Russians. So I appreciate everyone's concern. I just appreciate everyone's concern.
Absolutely, because there's a lot of concerned people there. Yeah. Thank you. And I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
I want to thank the gentleman. I also want to remind the administrator that Goddard Space Flight Center and Stennis Space Center. I know you mentioned the other.
I said all the other centers. I didn't want to, because I can't always remember all 9.
It's like a grandfather trying to remember all of his grandkids' names.
That's true. All I need to do is look in front of me. Stennis.
I've witnessed that personally.
As you know, Mr. Chairman, everything that goes through space goes through Mississippi. As we say at Stennis.
And Mr. Chairman, I'm fixing to have a grandkid today.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations. In closing, I want to follow up on your exchange with Chairman Smith. You said that you never formally committed to the 2017 launch date for EM1. However, you have testified before this committee that the President's budget request for fiscal year 14 and fiscal year 15 would keep the EM1 launch date for 2017. You even told this committee that if Congress gave you $300 million more, you wouldn't notice it. NASA could have presented Congress with a budget that kept the 2017 date, but instead it chose to delay the program. And I hope we can work together to keep SLS on track. With that, I want to thank General Bolden for his testimony and the members for their questions. The record will remain open for 2 weeks for additional written comments and written questions from members. This hearing is adjourned.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.